My annotations come from Chapter 5, in which the authors discuss how figured worlds engage people to shape and be shaped by action. In the beginning of this section, they're discussing Dreyfus's ideas of expert knowledge, which I found easy to apply to writing center contexts and also teachers of writing. As they point out in the text, novice and beginners, or advanced beginners, tend to like and use rules and maxims to follow those. A lot of times new consultants and people who are not very comfortable with teaching or with writing themselves want these kinds of rules and maxims also. So they'll tend to focus on the kinds of areas in writing, sentence level, word level, punctuation kind of levels of concern, because they do have right and wrong answers. And that's something that's more comfortable. But as they gain experience and gain competency, they become more comfortable with the higher order kinds of concerns. Examples of those are on the right. This experience and a kind of comfort, consultants and people who are providing feedback for writers usually have a greater scheme for working with writers. They don't necessarily have to work through the details for themselves or to rely as much on physical mediating devices. They are able to support the writer and scaffold their learning. Well, I found the ideas of the cultural artifacts within a writing center and what they would be and how they would play out very interesting. I don't have time right here to talk about it, but I would like to consider the idea of inner speech and interactivity and how that plays out within consultations. The discussion of interactivity reminds me of the amount of talking and listening consultants do in writing consultations. Typically, the more comfortable or confident a consultant is, the more comfortable they are with silence for them or for the writer. Their interactivity and the writer's also interactivity. I'm also wondering how much of this interactivity or speech is metacognition. Is metacognition one part of inner speech? Is all inner speech metacognition? Just wondering. But Vygotsky's idea of fossilization was something I found very interesting, as it is a challenge that many of the writing instructors from across the disciplines that I work with face, especially those who have been working in the academy for a while. Things that they write and do seem so obvious and are ingrained within them that often it's hard to step back and be able to pick apart the components and be able to explain them to writers and how to do them. So it's my job to try to find ways to get instructors to re-see writing in their discipline, the separate elements of effective writing that go into what they do. So recently we developed an advanced summer WAC Academy writing across the curriculum with the main kind of question being, what do we really value? In which faculty from across the disciplines participated. A couple of examples of how we try to resist the kind of fossilization discussed here are in the reflective activities that we have instructors do. On the right, we have an example of activity that is draw your writing process, in which they think about the different parts, break them up, and then also visually display what their writing process looked like for a particular piece of writing. I also use exit slips for every workshop as a source of reflection for the people who are participating and also as a kind of formative assessment for myself. Another way that we try to work through the kind of fossilization that some faculty members may be struggling with is to kind of trouble things, try to introduce some cognitive dissidence in different ways, to rethink, to re-see things is what we're trying to encourage. Spend time unpacking a concept and often use Bob Braug's idea of dynamic criteria mapping as ways to break up these kinds of ideas. This whole last section made me think about a book that I've been recently reading, How Learning Works, because it's doing something similar to what Dreyfus and Vygotsky were talking about, but addresses it from a different kind of perspective. It's something we've been using with the QAP at East Carolina. To leave with one last interesting quote, I found this from Vygotsky and thought that it fit well with this area of the text. Speech for oneself is very different in its structure from speech from others. It simply cannot be expressed in the foreign structure of external speech. Hopefully we can talk about that more. Thanks.